All right, guys, what is up? Welcome into another episode of GC Live, counting down to South Carolina football and the season opener. 25 days away. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark, going to dive into some more observations from practice as we have not had a show since Saturday morning when we were out there. And then we'll dive into what Shane Beamer had to say today in his first press conference that he has had since camp has started. So 5 days in, 4 practices in is where South Carolina is right now. They did have the one mandatory day off as they get ready to put pads on later this week. Chris, let's first tell everybody about our good friend Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. And as we always tell them, we know you might not be in the market for a new home right now, but if that's something you're looking to do in the future, something that you want to go ahead and make plans for, Clint is your guy. You can call him. You can text him. Go ahead, set up a meeting. And what Clint is going to do is he's going to just take you through the entire process. He's going to let you know, hey, this is how much you need to be saving to afford the house you want to buy. This is how much you need to sort of plan for each month. And even if you're in a home right now, you want to potentially refinance, Clint can help you with that as well. So shout out to our guy, Clint Hammond, who has helped me buy a home, and he can do the same for you.
So also tell everybody here on the program about our good friends at Ferry Chevrolet. That's ferrychevrolet.com, Fairey Chevrolet.com, conveniently located in Orangeburg. So if you're around that area, obviously convenient to you, but even convenient to Columbia and Charleston. All we ask, just like Clint in the mortgage game, if you are in the market or thinking about being in the market in the future, whenever you are in the market for a new or used vehicle, make sure you make Ferry Chevrolet your first call. They've been around since 1926, obviously doing something right, and still led by a fourth-generation dealer over there in Joseph Ferry. That's 803-937-4531. Check out their website, ferrychevrolet.com. You can see their inventory, financing options, even contact them directly from there. That's ferrychevrolet.com.
Shout out to everybody already joining us there in the chat. If you're on a different platform, the best place to be involved in the chat, the place we're going to see it will be YouTube. So drop on over to youtube.com/GamecockCentral. And man, you know you're an old school listener of the show if you remember. Josh here remembers the Luke Doty football open. We're going to work on bringing back an opener. I got tired of updating it, and I was like, let's just start the show, because then I would have to edit it for the audio version as well. And I was just all about efficiency. But that may be something we bring back. We obviously are working with JC and Jamie now. Jamie does a great job. Jamie Bradford does, doing all the video openings for their show. He's offered to work one up for us, so I think I'm going to take him up on that. But just for old time's sake, I did think about throwing this in there, so let's just do it.
Coach Doty.
Coach Doty now. I wonder if he still does that. Anybody know?
I hope so.
Needs to.
They need to do a callback. Good idea for the social media team at USC. Just do a little callback with now a Coach Doty version of that.
Heck yeah. See lots of questions in the chat. Try to get to some of them. Chris, let's dive into what Beamer had to say today. You know, a typical Tuesday afternooner. I think we learned a little bit. You're not going to learn a ton. You haven't had a scrimmage yet. You haven't been in pads yet. We did get a fresh but small update on Jacarius Peak and Dylan Stewart, and really the entire health of the team. Beamer being asked, like, hey, are there any new injuries to report? He said, quote, nah, normal bumps and bruises. Couple of things that flared up today. Want to get a full report before we update anything. The two you're mainly interested in, Peak and Dylan, continue to progress. And then it's that time of year in preseason camp. So he was also asked to follow up on Stewart and Peak and said they're at practice and they're doing different parts of what they're able to throughout the day. As far as the timeline, again, we'll go on what the doctors tell us. And as I've said to you guys for the last month, they're right on track and progressing nicely. So, you know, he's going to get asked about that. I think every time he speaks, you're going to get, I think until the answer is one of them has returned full go at practice, which I think we all would love for that to be the answer at some point soon. But until that is the answer, Chris, I think what you're hearing from Beamer is probably about what you're going to get on those guys.
Yes, that's going to be the case. Honestly, no need to even be frustrated by it because that's just what you're going to get. I think the question that I think it begs, especially with what he said today, and he's used that terminology in the past of on track, progressing nicely. And I think people are wondering, okay, on track for what in particular, right? Like when, more specifically, does that mean they're on track to be able to play game 1, game 3, game 6? What does that mean? Um, and I think I kind of go back to something we talked about since very early with these, Wes, with Dylan's recovery, with Peak's injury and recovery, kind of a moving target at times, right? Like I'm sure internally, and we haven't been able to find out this exactly internally, they probably have a better idea than is what's being portrayed of, hey, if everything goes well, they're on track to maybe be back by X date that we don't really know what that is. And I think that's what people actually want to know. But again, probably not going to get that. And it's recovery. It's kind of a moving target. You're not talking about getting guys, that you look at Dylan and Jakari's Peak moving around. You pointed this out with Peak at Media Day. It's not like you wouldn't know, oh, that guy just had a pretty big time injury earlier in the year. Like you wouldn't really know that, but we're talking about getting back to football and putting pads on and hitting people once they put pads on I think Friday is the day, first day of full pads. Kind of a big jump there, a big leap. So we don't exactly know. We'll keep working on it to see what we hear. I agree with you. That's probably what we're going to get publicly until there's a more firm update of, hey, those guys are back at practice fully, or those guys are now dressed out for practice, and maybe they're limited, but they're kind of integrating more into what they're doing on a daily basis. So we'll see, but that's probably what we're going to hear until that point.
No doubt. And so let's dive into what we did learn today. I tell you what, man, I think that this Neff Jiwa story is going to be, I don't know, quite to the hype of maybe Nick Harbor his freshman year, but it kind of has given me those vibes because remember how many questions about Harbor as that year progressed, and a little bit different when you're talking about a 5-star prospect in Harbor. But even then, it was, hey, look, this guy is a phenomenal athlete, but he's never played wide receiver before. Now, he had played football, and you're not talking about moving into a new country, putting on pads and helmets for the first time, all these different things. It's not exactly the same, but at any other point, would Beamer be getting asked in multiple press conferences about a offensive lineman who had not played football before? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and I think a guy who frankly just does not project to be a starter or a backup for you at tackle this year, you wouldn't be getting multiple questions about it every single time you speak if you're Beamer. But because it is such a unique story, because he is such a great athlete, then it is a thing now. And so people are kind of invested in that a little bit to see what that mean. What does it mean for a guy to come over here as a freak athlete, has never played American football, and then say it's almost like a reality show? Can he find a way to impact the team? And I think we get a little glimpse today. It backed up some of the stuff that people have already read from us on Gamecock Central, and that was that, hey, look, this dude is doing everything in his power to be able to catch up, so to speak. And the staff, little bit of a nod from Beamer, a little hint from Beamer there today in saying, like, look, we need to find a way to use this guy's skill set, even if that doesn't mean plugging him in there and asking him to go play offensive tackle in the SEC his first year of playing football.
Yeah, and that's something that's been brought up a lot. I know JC over at the Big Spurs talked about, hey, is this a guy that you'd find, special teams, that's your path, right? We talk about that so much. Younger players who maybe won't have the opportunity to carve out a big role because they're inexperienced, or they're learning a new position, or they've got guys ahead of them, right? Where can you make an impact? Special teams, and with as much time as South Carolina spends on special teams, you don't want to say it's there's no learning curve, right? For a guy like Nefgiwa, everything he's doing right now is a learning curve. It's brand new to him. Every day in practice, he's seeing something for the first time. The things that they've done before, Randy Clement's offensive line drills, there are some things that they do every day in practice. And so he'll get more and more familiar with it. But when you look at him, this isn't just this is a safety, who's only played a couple years of football, or this is even like a Justin Okoronkwo, Wes. Think about him heading into Bama. He had played some organized football at the club level in Germany, but he had a big learning curve to learn how to play football in the SEC. The terminology, I talked to him, there's a bit of a language gap there where he was still learning like how to communicate effectively in English. It's different because when you think about Neff, this is a guy who's going to be an offensive lineman by trade, and that's the position he's working at. That's the position he's learning. But he has such a unique potential skill set because he is so big, because he is so athletic. And so what can you find for him to do if he can do it effectively? And, I am intrigued by, are there some possibilities to put him out there on special teams? A little bit more limited in terms of what you're going to face down by down. If it's, hey, go, just as an example, not saying this will happen, go out there and get on field goal block, not as big of a learning curve there. It's a lot different than, hey, we're putting you out there on edge, go block a first round pick that you're going to see most weeks in the SEC. So that might be a path for him. We'll see. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and so something else, Chris, I want to dive into, not from the press conference today, but something that I think is a little bit newsworthy, even if it's not surprising. And that is, I posted this on the Insiders Forum on Gamecock Central, and an article from David Cloninger today, of course, formerly with GC, currently with Post and Courier, and a quote from Kendall Briles from back at the Beamer Golf outing. I guess that would have been a week or two ago, talking about the backup quarterback competition, if you will. Cutter's our guy. I think we have a clear number 2 right now. And, of course, sort of confirming that the battle for number 3 is Lucian Anderson III and Landon Duckworth. And, I think we all projected Cutter to be the backup. We all kind of knew it would be, a massive upset, a huge shock, I think, if Cutter was not the number 2. But this was the first time, and maybe I missed something, this was the first time I'd seen it just laid out completely, deliberately, matter-of-factly, like, hey, Cutter is the number 2 guy. So not only do you know who QB1 is, you know who your backup is, you go in without, this time last year, I think we were talking about a backup quarterback competition. And so we're not at that point right now. You have that sort of structure. Not a surprise at all, but still noteworthy in my opinion. And, I think we continue to hear, and I think that there would be a great deal of confidence in Cutter Woods if he had to go into a football game. And I think if you get really ahead of yourself, there's always kind of been a little bit of a thought, a little bit of an understanding, reading between the lines around the program that, hey, this is probably the guy you're leaning into in terms of being like next up. Like if you were going to project it going into the post Lenora Sellers era at South Carolina, you would say Cutter is by far the favorite for that. And, so I think a little bit of an under the radar, but newsy type item worth mentioning today as well.
Yeah, no surprise, like you said, but also you don't always just get that laid out, and so it's been laid out, even though it's not a surprise whatsoever. I think you brought up a good point. Yeah, man, there is enough to dissect for 2026 that, you don't really want to look forward. But you think about this year, you think about backups, right? We've seen situations at South Carolina plenty of times where you got to put the next guy in. And if that has to happen, how do you feel about that situation? And we've heard enough behind the scenes, and there's been enough even said publicly, Wes, that this staff seems to have confidence in Cutter Woods, right? And so the hope is that your starting quarterback plays every meaningful snap in a game this year and is healthy and is thriving. But you also want to feel good in the short term about having a guy who can come in and run your offense and that you feel confident in it. And it seems like that's what they feel like they have in Cutter. And then you think about the next year, nobody wants to think about 2027 yet because everything's focused on 2026, rightfully so, and getting this thing turned around. But if you are looking ahead a little bit, there's always that, all right, well, who's next? That you kind of think about that the Dylan Stewart era is going to end after this year. You kind of think about, all right, who's next? Who's the next big time edge you can plug in there? You absolutely think about that at the quarterback position. It's the most important position on the field. And it's not, especially in the portal era, it's not always a situation where you can go, all right, we feel really good about our backup quarterback. Now, he hasn't played a lot. We all know that. Very limited playing time. But to feel good about him in the short term and to be like, look, we've actually got this guy not locked in, but we've got this guy kind of up next, I think is what you said, Wes. That's a great way to put it. Kind of up next in the hopper, so to speak, that you can plug in the post Sellers era. And that's something you got to feel pretty good about. But he's just a super competitive guy. He's one of those guys that seems really good at everything. Teammates love him. The coaching staff loves him. Man, even if you see like Kendall Briles interact with Cutter Woods, you can tell there's a really, really good rapport there. And you feel like this is a guy that's really going to be able to take his offense and run it, very well, very efficiently. He can run a bit. He can throw. He's a gamer. A lot to like about Cutter.
I think the other thing there too, as we kind of move it back into 2026, if he were to have to go out there, one question we've been getting on the forum, how much would the offense have to change if that did happen? And I would probably say not as much as you might think. Like, not that these are identical skill sets by any means. And I think you would have to maybe adjust it a little bit. I think it probably would look a little bit more like what you saw with Josh Hoover last year. That's really been one of the, I guess, positives of a Kendall Briles offensive scheme is it does really adjust to the guy that's behind center. And, that's something where I think there would be adjustments. There would be adjustments in play calling. You probably aren't calling some of the QB design run stuff as much. But if you need Cutter to go out there and run the football some, if you need Cutter to escape the pocket, roll the pocket, all those different things, Cutter is a good bit more athletic than probably people think just off the jump there. So I think that's something where it would not take a ton of just tweaking if you're that staff, if Cutter had to go out there, which I think is good as well. Something else going through what Beamer had to say today, some of it a little bit more just confirmation of some stuff we'd already talked about. Obviously, very, very high. He kind of perked up when he was talking about Darius Gray, Chris, and we'll maybe get to that here in a second. But a couple other little notes talking about the kicker battle. Said there's really no timeline, no time frame. He said if someone were to kind of separate themselves, then maybe they go ahead and do name a starting kicker. But as of right now, that has not happened. And certainly I would not expect them to name a starting kicker before these two scrimmages. One scrimmage coming up this Saturday, another next week. That is such an important couple of days for a kicker. I don't think you're going to even consider doing that. Even if one guy was by far and away the best, I think you got to go perform in the scrimmage in order to earn a job like that. And Chris, I did kind of perk up a little bit when he was talking about David Busey and saying like, look, people maybe need to be talking about this guy a little bit more. And I think we've all been, myself included, a little bit guilty of penciling Jazavian Currents in there. And Jazavian Currents is going to play a big role in this team before this year is over. Like I feel pretty confident saying that he's definitely strongly in the mix and going to play in the rotation, if not start. But it sounds like Busey continues to make progress, continues to develop, and kind of has earn the respect of this coaching staff, which obviously is a big part of earning the time to go play.
And Wes, just for context on the Busey question, because I missed a little portion of the press conference taking a call. Did he brought that up unprompted about Busey?
He was asked about Busey.
He was asked about Busey. Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering. But yeah, I mean, that is the interesting thing about Busey is like, and I think we've tried to be careful of like, don't write this guy off. None of us have just said like, oh, Carolina signed Currents, done deal, he's the starter, right? We have heard enough and seen enough to know that, like you said, Wes, Currents is going to play a role. Like, I think the question is how big is the role and how quickly does that happen? We've seen situations, and hopefully this doesn't happen, but we've seen situations where two of South Carolina's best DBs in recent memory, in Jalen Kilgore and Nicky Manwari, both NFL guys, obviously, both those guys got their first opportunities because of an injury. You know, that they come into the game, they weren't the starter, they come in as freshmen, they go play. You never know when that number might get called, or it might happen more organically. But for Busey, you know, he's someone that does everything the right way. Does he have the measurables? Does he have the raw athleticism of a Currents? He does not. But he played more last year. He's played special teams. He's been an important guy for them on special teams. And so he's someone to not write off there. And I think that's, you know, one of the question marks about this team. And there are several, but I think safety is one of them. Who's going to be the starter? What type of depth can they build? How does the rotation shake out? How is it split and when? And, you know, not surprised that we heard that about Busey, because he's kind of one of those guys that you don't take because he's the best athlete in the country. He's not 6'4" like Currents, but he's just a good football player, you know. And I think Beamer's quote was that he just kind of embodies everything that you want this program to be.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're talking about a press conference, but honestly, pretty strong words there if you ask me. So probably not going to count that kid out. Going to be a big part of what they try to do on defense, whether that is kind of maintaining that starting role or potentially taking on a little bit different role. Couple of questions in here. Brian asked, why not make Neff a tight end? I mean, I will say this, though, Brian. I think even if you're talking about him playing some tight end, that would have to be very, very situationally. You know, goal line, putting him out there in very specific, like fourth down or goal line type situations, short yardage, because I mean, it may be harder to learn tight end than offensive tackle, just in terms of the sheer volume of what you're going to be asked to do. Does he have ball skills? Can he catch the football? What's the difference between catching a ball in rugby and catching a football like that? You know, I think you're talking about a lot of development there, regardless of which position you're talking about. But the frame, the long arms, the quick feet, with another year or two in a weight program, like I think the view is like the upside is NFL offensive tackle. You know what I'm saying? And you know, that I think that's what they're aiming for. But could you do some like creative things with him? Then yes, absolutely. And I think with Bryles, you do have a guy who is going to be willing to do some of those things. And you know, I can't remember who said this, but I think it was Ryan McGee. We had him on the radio show. He's like, hey, you're going to get a creative guy at offensive coordinator with Kendall Bryce. That really, it's going to be the opposite of what you had, you know, maybe last year. It's going to be more like if people are throwing their phone watching the game, it's going to be because every now and then you might be like, what the heck was that? Because he kind of went so outside the box in trying to get creative. So, you know, I feel pretty comfortable if Neff can help you in some way, that they will experiment and see if that way exists. But, you know, I think full-time tight end, probably pretty tough, and just full-time long-term, they just think he's a tackle.
Yeah, tight end's not, situationally, like you said, and that may have been what Josh meant there, but just saying play tight end, um, it's not an easy position to play either. You've got some experienced guys on the roster, very physical position. You got to learn blocking. You got to learn, a lot of different techniques. You got the passing game. There's a lot there, and so I think when the staff is talking about trying to find ways to get him on the field, again, recognizing that this is his first year of football. Um, didn't go through spring, right? First year of football, first practices, not even in pads yet. He'll have played football in pads by game one for what, a few weeks, Wes, at that point. And so it's going to have to be very niche, very situational. But can they find some things to do with him? That might be the case.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, hey, before we go any further, Chris, let's you want to dive into a couple of our new sponsors or our old time sponsors, our long time sponsors. Who are we talking about right now? Let's talk about our friends at Rytech first. How about that?
Let's do it. Let's talk about Rytech. I love talking about those guys. Founded by our guy Steven back in 2007. Locally owned electrical company based right here where we are, Wes, in the Midlands. So if you're anywhere in the Midlands, they're based in Lexington. They can service your home or your business. 4.9 stars from over 400 Google reviews, residential and commercial electrical work. Some quick things to know about Rytech that we talk about all the time. Every electrician on their team is a direct Rytech employee. They don't use subcontractors. They're not going to come out to your home and business and quote you a price and then send a bunch of people that you have no idea who they work for. You're going to get Rytech employees to your home or business. They're going to tell you the price before they touch a single wire, and every repair is going to be backed with a 1-year parts and labor guarantee. So if you've got an electrical issue like flickering lights, dead outlets, tripping breakers, if you need your panel upgrade, whatever it may be, give them a call, 803-303-8274. A real person's going to pick up and help you, and that's rytechelectric.com. Check them out on Google, Rytech Electric.
Shout out to our guy Still Curtin, by the way, popping in there on the chat. Hadn't seen that name in a minute. Chris, let's also give a shout out to our friends over at Poncho. I know some Gamecock fans were excited about this, the launch of the South Carolina Poncho game day collection. Chris, you gonna hold it up for everybody right there? There it is. That's the Gamecock logo there on your Poncho shirt. Is that the Carolina script Carolina on the sleeve as well, I believe? Yep. And cool deal going on right now. If you buy your team's game day shirt between August 2nd, so this is already started, you don't have much time left, actually. August 2nd through August 16th, you are covered by Poncho's Natty Back guarantee. If your team wins the college football national championship, Poncho will give you a full refund on your purchase. Plus, of course, you get to keep the shirt. And we actually have a deal going right now, guys, or if you go to ponchooutdoors.com/Gamecock Central, enter your email, you'll get $10 off and free shipping on your first order. That's PONCHO outdoors.com/Gamecock Central. Head there, drop in your email, you get $10 off and free shipping. Once you try one, you'll get why. You're going to have a full closet full, just like Chris does over there at his house, with a best looking, most comfortable shirt that you can possibly find. Again, shout out to our friends over at Poncho, and welcome here to GC Live, being our newest sponsor, one of our newest sponsors here on the show throughout the 2026 football season. Be on the lookout the next few days. We're going to tell you about a couple of other new sponsors here on the show. Chris, it's been kind of watch list season. It's been preseason list, preseason All-American, top 25 season. On3 doing something a little bit new now, man. They just put out the On3 top 25, which I kind of wondered why we at On3 were not doing this, and now I see that we are doing this, because when you start talking about guys like, Andy Staples, Chris Lowe, Brett McMurphy, just veterans of the game, sort of being all under one roof, it just makes sense to do your own top 25. And so they popped out the On3 top 25 this week. From a South Carolina perspective, it seems like this is going to be the trend for the Gamecocks this year going into the season before they can prove otherwise. the old others receiving votes category. AP will put theirs out, I think, on Monday the 17th. I would guess Gamecocks and others receiving votes category for that as well. Assuming the receiving votes category was in order, they didn't say it was, but assuming it is on the on-3 list, South Carolina, I'm actually a little bit surprised they weren't a little bit higher than this, Chris. 37th in the country via the on-3 team. And I think we're starting to get a consensus on who maybe the top 5 or so teams are in terms of at least what people think. Ohio State, number 1 for on-3. Oregon 2, Texas 3, Georgia 4, Notre Dame 5, Indiana 6, Miami 7. That's where I draw a line, Chris. I think I draw a line after the top 7. Because once I start talking about 8, Oklahoma, 9, Ole Miss, 10, A&M, 11, Texas Tech, I have a lot more questions than I do for that top 7. Not that everybody in the top 7, Chris, is elite or infallible or can't be beaten. I think there are questions within the top 7, but I think there's a clear line of demarcation when I'm talking about how I feel about Miami versus how I may feel about Oklahoma.
Yeah. I I'm not sure where I draw the line yet, because you're right. No, like none of those teams are infallible. Like you go to Indiana. They've got, far be it from me to bet against Kurt Cignetti, right? And actually all of those top 7 teams received at least 1 vote for first place, right? Texas actually got 4 votes.
Except, ironically, for Ohio State.
What you mean?
You said they all received a first place vote?
Yeah.
Ohio State did not receive a first place vote.
Oh.
Even though they finished.
Yes, they finished number 1. Yeah. Yeah. That's really fascinating. Huh.
I don't even know how, I don't know how they count these things up.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was possible.
I didn't know that was possible either.
But it is.
I guess it ended up that way. Yes. I assumed they just didn't put that because Ohio State was number 1. But yes, I did not get as much into the fine print as you did. So good point. But, like you look at Indiana, they have added, Turbo Richard from Rock Hill. They've added back a couple players. One of them, Stephen Daly, who was an absolute hoss for them last year. Kellen Wyatt. They got Josh Hoover, who was Kendall Brow's quarterback last year. Charlie Becker's back. Like, they got Kurt Cignetti. Probably going to be really good. And they kind of get the benefit of the doubt because they won it all last year and ran through everybody. They also lost the Heisman Trophy winner, You look at Oklahoma, they were really good, kind of go down to number 8. Oklahoma, they were really, really good. And now you've got John Mateer playing with, both hands to where he wasn't last year. Ole Miss, you've got the Lane Kiffin to Pete Golding handoff, but they've got a couple of the best players in the country back. So I don't know, like I might draw the line a little bit lower. Like I might cut it off after like 10 or 11, just my personal opinion. I do think the ones in the top 5 to 6 are probably a little bit higher than the others, maybe even that top 7, but I could talk myself into getting a little bit farther down there. One other thing that stands out, Wes, about South Carolina being in that, like we've seen a lot of the others receiving votes to take it locally to South Carolina. That's interesting to me because, a lot of times you go 4 and 8. We talk about all the time about it's kind of based on what you did last year. Like you look at where South Carolina's ranked in the SEC and the preseason media poll. A lot of it is what did you do last year? Well, people are not giving South Carolina, like in these top 25 others receiving votes category. There's not a consensus that South Carolina, you're 4 and 8 last year. It sounds about right for this year. Like there's a recognition that this team had some close games last year that didn't go their way, that they underachieved relative probably to the talent level, that they brought back a lot of talent, that they added some, and that they've revamped their coaching staff. So I think we're kind of seeing them get a little bit of credit, for those things in some of these top 25 rankings. Not that they matter. Doesn't matter at the end of the day. If you want to have the type of season, if you're going to have the type of season that you want to have, you obviously not only have to be in the top 25, you got to be higher up in it. You got to be in that top half. But I just thought that was interesting that some people are buying stock in South Carolina being, having a substantially better year than last year. And I think it's based on all the offseason moves that happen.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now I think once you start, and again, the on three does not do you assume the others receiving votes is in order as well? Because
I did, but I don't know.
On the what was the coaches poll, they put the number of votes they received in parentheses, so then you can kind of for sure and you count it out. If you're talking about 37, for an SEC school, you're definitely saying I still see questions here. If you have an SEC, if you start talking about getting potentially towards the 40s, but also even the fact that you have almost 40 teams receiving votes tells me that nobody knows what the heck is going to happen, that there's the potential for any number of outcomes this year because the talent has gotten just so spread out once we've started getting into, a number of years of this current portal/NIL era that we're in. And, interestingly enough, you have Auburn a couple of spots ahead of South Carolina on this thing. You have, Clemson right outside the top 25. I think they were inside the top 25 in the coaches poll, even though there are a lot of questions about Clemson going to this year. So I do think there's a point too on that list where, dude, you could just throw everybody in a bag and shake it up and pull out a team, and you would have just as good a chance as being right as maybe if you were actually trying to project the thing. Who knows what these teams with new coaches and 40 transfers are going to look like this year.
Wes, your favorite preseason team. I've been poking fun at you, and so I'm not poking fun at you because there's really nothing funny about it. Like, I could very well see it, but Oregon. Aren't you kind of an Oregon stan going into this season? Is that your team?
I mean, it's not my team.
Not your team as in you got on the duck costume or anything, But
are you asking? Are they my favorite for the title?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't decided, dude. I think Texas is loaded. No, I think
they are loaded, no doubt.
I think Sark's got to prove it, but again, what does that even mean? We would have been if 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever that was, you were saying, man, Ohio State is loaded, but Ryan Day has got to prove it for me, so I'm not picking Ohio State. Then all of a sudden, they win a title. They're playing for the title just about every year. Like, they're in the conversation every year. So it's like, okay, what does that even really mean? Like, it's easy for somebody to sit there and be like, you haven't won it yet, so I can't predict you. Well, people win it for the first time all the time now, it seems. So, I go way back and forth on all these top teams, man. Like, I tend to think is Indiana just living off of what they did last year to an extent. It's so hard to do it back to back, but then you look at some of the guys they bring back and what they brought in with Hoover at quarterback. Notre Dame went from the team that is the typically most overhyped team ever, just kind of historically, to I almost feel like that's reversed course. People are like, oh, it's Notre Dame, I'm not taking them seriously. And then you look at what they have coming back. They're going to be great on defense. They have CJ Clark, quarterback, who I think people maybe, especially in our neck of the woods, don't realize quite yet how good that guy is. And then you have one of the easier schedules among these top 10 teams. Like how much stock do we put into the schedule versus the best
Huge.
team itself? Like Texas may be the best team in this top 10, but they got a more brutal schedule than a Notre Dame, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and even as pointed out in the On3 article, even Ohio State, tougher schedule this year than you're accustomed to, right? You play at Texas, you've got at Iowa. Oh, let me make sure I mention Illinois so Brett Bielema doesn't get mad at me. They have to play Illinois in Columbus. Whatever. At Iowa, you're at Indiana, you go to Southern Cal, you got Oregon at home, and then you got the rivalry game with Michigan. You also have to go to Nebraska. Is that a sneaky tough game? Maybe. I don't know. But, again, like it's about getting into the playoff, but it's also about for an Ohio State, like getting yourself a good draw in the playoff. And you do have to go take care of business in these games. So, yeah, I mean, the schedule absolutely, I think, weighs into the equation, and teams that have a more favorable schedule. We were talking to Gabe DeArmond from Power Mizzou on the Garnet Trust Hour on the radio, Wes, and we were talking about how Missouri, who I think was also in the others receiving votes category, I kind of had a playful comment to Gabe about like, yeah, a lot of people are talking about how the schedule's a little tougher than usual for Missouri because we like to poke fun at how their schedule's always soft. And he said it's a lot harder, so all these SEC teams, not all of them, but a lot of these SEC teams, Big Ten teams are looking around going, what do we have to do to make the playoff? So, something else that struck me, Wes, like just going over this list and you talking about some of the quarterbacks, maybe it's just me. I feel like there's so many good quarterbacks this year. Like you can just start in the SEC, but then you go to the Big Ten. And I mean, there's a load of good quarterbacks. I think just the competition level there is awesome, that we're going to see this year.
Do you think that's NIL? Like guys aren't just jumping. Not that all of them could have at this point, but Dante Moore would 100% be in the NFL right now, if not for the NIL aspects. Is John Mateer in the NFL right now? Is Lenore Sellers in the NFL right now? Like how many of these guys would have already just jumped? Trinidad Chambliss isn't suing people to be able to come back and play.
Yes.
If there's not a payday.
Well, it's involved. A mix of all of it. Like you've got Gunnar Stockton at Georgia taking the more classic route of like, go there as a high school guy, wait your turn, go play, get established, come back. Not going to be as much of an NFL guy as some of these other names out there, but yeah, absolutely. You've got the fact that some guys haven't transferred. Mateer came from Washington State. So instead of him talking about, hey, Washington State has this really good quarterback because of the portal era and NIL, we're talking about him now playing in the SEC. Some other guys haven't jumped ship because it makes more sense for them to stay in school and maybe potentially make more money and just continue developing their game. So I think it's just a mix of all those things, man. But I mean, college football, one of the reasons we love watching it's because of all the talent you get to see before they go pro. But, and even guys that don't end up going pro, but I haven't like gone back and studied it or like compared like, 2022 or 3, like such a good year for quarterbacks. But it just kind of seems to me like there's more really good quarterbacks than ever, and even your guy, another guy on your list, like Kamario Taylor, like he's getting some buzz of like, this guy's a great athlete, but by the end of the year, shoot, he could be, this guy's an absolute stud. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Like he has that type of ability. So you got a mix of like really established guys and guys looking to, reach their potential, and they have a lot of it.
Well, and we hadn't even kind of dove into Arch Manning, Sam Levitt, Marcel Reed, whoever wins the Alabama QB job may, like, we don't know yet, so you can't put them ahead of a lot of those guys. But what if Keelan Russell is ready? This guy was a 5-star. Austin Simmons was set to. I mean, this time last year, were we even talking about Chambliss yet? I mean, Austin Simmons was supposed to be the guy at Ole Miss, and Trinidad didn't even go through spring practice with Ole Miss, and so I think, I don't know, man. It's going to be fun. Like I saw a list of the Big Ten quarterbacks, the top 10. I think it was from Josh Pate. That's a deep conference in terms of QB play as well, man. Like if you listed out like the top 20 quarterbacks, if you did like a combined Big Ten and SEC pool and said, give me the top 20 quarterbacks in these, like that's a deep list, dude. So I think it's absolutely probably as strong as it's ever been. At least from since we've been like really, really following it and tracking it from this standpoint. Related news, Chris, in that not really news, but another kind of preseason, to me, another like, the season is almost here marker. The Freaks list comes out. And for one, I think one of the coolest pieces of preseason college football content every single year. Feldman's been doing it forever now. Nick Harbaugh, you knew he would make the list. I didn't know if he would end up number one. He does end up number one. That means he's made the list for 4 years, and he's been number one for 3 of the 4 years. But South Carolina, again, just another representation of some of the high-end talent on this team. You have 3 guys in the top 30 or so on this list with Harbaugh, Dylan Stewart, of course, and Lenora Sellers. And really, you could have made a case for other guys. I think if Jacarius Peak was not coming off of an injury, Chris, he probably makes the list as well because he was on it last year.
Yep. He's been on it before. He's a veteran. And that probably is what held him back. And, Dylan Stewart was way up there. Certainly not a shock that Harbaugh was up there. There's probably a couple other candidates, Wes, but there's, 101 guys on this list. There's a lot of college football teams. There's a lot of freaky guys out there, right? So not everybody can make the list. That thing I thought was interesting is, this list is not, here are the best really athletic guys who are also great football players. Like there are some of those on that list. But it really starts with just the sheer athleticism. And I thought it was interesting that Lenora Sellers fell, from where he's been in the past, if I'm not mistaken. This is still a guy that has some absolute freaky attributes, and I think you can take some of statistically what he can do, how fast he can run at a specific size and specific strength metrics. And then I don't know how much Bruce Feldman bakes in, like, oh, he ran over 7 guys on a run play, but those are the types of things he can do. So I do think a little of it is kind of colored by what's actually happened recently, right? So Sellers didn't have the type of season that everyone anticipated last year. Maybe he, even if it was just subconsciously, got docked a little bit for that. And same thing with Peak. But, to go back to the point about the others receiving votes stuff that we're talking about, I think that's what people point to. They go, yeah, South Carolina was 4-8 last year, but maybe they fixed some of the issues that held them back. And they've also got some of these type of guys that are still on the roster and still a year older.
I do think it's funny. People will mention, hey, they got these 3 guys, and then people will, of course, respond and say, well, they had those 3 guys and they won 4 games last year. But they had those 3 guys and they won 9 games the year before. So it's almost as if 3 guys do not make up a football team. It's like, who knew? Who knew? But all right. So closing it out, man. My guys who I think would, again, there's 101 guys. It's hard to say anybody got snubbed. I'm certainly not going through and doing the level of research that Feldman has done on the entire country. I haven't done 1% of that work. So I defer to him. Some guys that I think, though, would have a shot to be in the conversation with this. As God Loves Comics says, Neff Jiwa, if he makes any type of impact whatsoever, will ultimately be on this list. I think J.R. Johnson probably makes a great case. And a little bit of an under-the-radar guy for me, not under the radar in what he's done, but in terms of just athleticism, is Vakari Swain. I mean, that guy is as sudden, as quick, as twitchy as about anybody you're ever going to find. And, I think a lot of these guys, it's more about who is super fast while also being huge, I think gets you on these lists. That's obviously not Vakari, but that dude is as freaky of an athlete as South Carolina has, maybe behind Nick. So I think that's a couple of guys that could make a case that could have been on there.
Yeah, and I think with Vakari, it's probably that's something you kind of have to check the tape a little bit more. Like I'm sure I don't know what he runs in the 40 as of late. I don't know his shuttle time or the cone drill. I imagine they're all good, but like he just has that football speed, and instinct, and he does some freaky things on the field that maybe they don't even translate as much to some testing measurable, which a lot of those are. But like J.R. Johnson, you mentioned, Wes, like big guys who are fast, 6'4", 240, runs in the 4.4s, pretty freaky, I mean, he's probably like next up on the list of just missed the cut, Peak, J.R. Johnson. Those are some guys that could, probably could have made it.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, let's close it out. Yes, I will be in Hartsville next week. Chris, you're in Spartanburg tonight. Is that right?
I'm in Spartanburg tonight. Looking forward to seeing some Gamecock fans up there. I'm in Charleston later this week. We're going on tour, Wes. You and I are.
Apparently we are. Separately, though. But
separately, yes.
Yeah, if you guys are in any of these areas, like this is for Gamecock Club preseason meetings, Chris. Like you said, Spartanburg today, Charleston the 14th, Darlington Gamecock Club, but it's in Hartsville. I think that's how I have it listed. The 17th, I will be there. The 22nd, Chris will be in Chester. Shout out to Chester. That's where my mom's from and where my grandparents were from when they were living. And I will be in Augusta on the 25th. And I will be in Florence on the 26th. You got any other ones, Chris?
We may be adding a couple of dates to the tour, West. We have not locked them in, but we may have Marion and Greenville as well. Stay tuned.
Okay. And I'm doing Sumter, I think.
It's a lot of them.
I got to check my calendar. I'm doing Sumter on the 27th, I think. So, yeah, lots of, y'all check in with your local Gamecock club because we'll be doing, they'll be having events whether we are there or not, I'm sure.
That's
and
right.
Those are always good and, gives you some good information. Chris, where are you at in Spartanburg?
Just pulling up the address. We are at 1 Morgan Square, which is on Dunbar Street in Spartanburg. So come on by.
Come say hey to Chris.
Yes. Love to see you.
Yeah, I am doing Sumter that's the 27th. So lots of stuff going on. All right, y'all, we're going to get out of here and get back to GamecockCentral.com where we would love for you to come hang out with us. If you see it going across the bottom there, if you're not a member, this deal is running out very, very soon, like later this week, like 2 days away.
Ooh.
And where'd my graphic go? There it is. Sign up right now if you're not a member, 75% off. That's $30 for the year. That's like $2.50 per month, but billed for the year at $30. So if you're not a member, we would love to have you come join us for what I think is going to be a very exciting football season. So looking forward to that. He is Chris. I am Wes. For everybody in the chat, thank you guys for joining us. Great to see some new screen names on there. Great to see some of you old heads that have been there with us from the very, very beginning. And man, let's close it out the way we started it. With football! Our guy Luke Doty. Y'all have a good one. We'll see you very, very soon.